On this list, you'll find 50 cars, 50. I need all 50 delivered to Long Beach Harbor, Pier 14, by 8 a.m. 4 days from now. I'm paying $200,000.
I'm not interested. I'm just here for my brother.
Okay, retro, go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies and specifically talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 280, and we are kicking off Cage-A-Palooza 2024, our month-long celebration of all things Nick Cage. And joining me to talk about a Nick Cage film that he had not seen before, it's JF Dubeau. JF, how are you?
I'm good. How ashamed am I supposed to be for not having seen Gone in 60 Seconds in the decades it's been out?
Mild shame. Mild shame.
Shame.
So, yeah, so the movie's Gone in 60 Seconds, came out in 2000, starring Nick Cage, directed by Dominic Sena, a remake. We'll talk about that. But first, what I'm curious about is, was this one that you just had no interest in and kind of slipped by you? Or, like, how was it you didn't see this one?
It's not my kind of movie. Just
Okay.
from a base level, it's not the movies I gravitate towards. I'm not, as I say, I'm not a Fast and Furious kind of guy, nor any of the proto Fast and Furiouses that might have come before.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not that I didn't enjoy the movie.
Sure,
but we'll talk about why all those details as we go along, I guess.
Yeah, and I can understand that. If it's not your type of movie, you're not going to get into that. Now, last year, I had you on for Cage-A-Palooza because we talked about Renfield.
Yes.
And so I know you like Nick Cage because he's always making choices, whether good or bad. Something's happening.
I like Nick Cage because he's what I would describe as an honest actor.
Yes. That's a good way to put it.
He seems to very much, unless he's got massive tax debts to pay, he seems to mostly take roles that are interesting to him on an artistic level, which I don't think we see that so much anymore.
It really depends on if you have an actor versus a movie star, because there's a distinction there between those. And this was kind of during his movie star phase, I would call it almost, in so much as like this came out in a stretch of movies he made with starting kind of, I mean, there's It Could Happen to You and It Trapped in Paradise in 94, but he wins his Oscar in 1995 for Leaving Las Vegas. And then we hit kind of action movie Nick Cage era, right? Where he does The Rock and Con Air and Face Off back to back to back.
Right.
And Snake Eyes and things like that. And this was in that same vein. It's decently budgeted. I think it came out in 2000 in a budget of around $90 million, which isn't huge by Hollywood blockbuster standards. But even at that point, it was a big budget for this. And
right, and I mean it's not a movie that has a dozen superstars in it. There's very low special effects. Everything's practical. They shoehorned a helicopter in there for some reason.
It's Jerry Bruckheimer.
We'll get to that. I have opinions.
Yeah, it's a Jerry Bruckheimer production.
That
That's probably where the helicopter came from.
Oh yeah, there's stuff in there that explodes that would never explode in real life. So I'm just shocked the helicopter didn't run into a bridge with no provocation. I guess it was just a rental.
Yeah. So Cage did say this film has kind of a glorified 70s B movie aura. That was a quote from him talking about it. And it kind of fits this movie in that it is that type of thing. So this is a remake. I don't know if you were realized that at all.
You mentioned that earlier, and that came as a surprise.
So the original film, Gone in 60 Seconds, was made in 1974. And it was written by, directed by, produced by, and starring a man named H.B. Halicki. Basically, kind of the one thing that he did. He made that movie. He made a second movie called The Junkman in 1982. And then in 1983, he kind of took a car chase he did in The Junkman and attached it to the beginning of his Gone in 60 Seconds, and put out a movie called Deadline Auto Theft. But it's basically the same movie. And his only other credits are Gone in 60 Seconds. He was credited as a writer for this movie that we saw. And that's kind of it. He was trying to do a sequel and sadly died in an accident, I think, while trying to film that. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna
something
say,
hit
like,
a
what
light
happened? He
pole.
couldn't get the same staff as he did before. I mean, he seemed to have done the whole thing himself.
Right. But I guess it was like 1989. He was working on a movie, and from what I read, like something hit a light pole and it landed on him, and he was killed while making that, or something. I didn't look into
God
it.
did not want that movie to happen.
Apparently not. Um, but I've seen clips of the original movie, and it's a completely different story. Like, the main character in that works in car insurance, but then steals cars on the side, but only steals cars that are insured.
That actually sounds more interesting.
It's got kind of an interesting plot. They dumbed it down for this. This was Disney bought the rights for Gone in 60 Seconds in the mid 90s and wanted to make a movie out of it. So they did it under their Touchstone brand. They brought in Dominic Senna, who was a music video director. He had made one film prior to this, which was California, with a K, starring Brad Pitt in like
Yes.
1993.
Another movie I didn't see because it doesn't, not my vibe.
Yeah. So he's mostly music video guy, and does this movie, and I think he's fine. I think there are a lot of times, a lot of those directors that came from a music video background were guys like David Fincher, Russell Mulcahy, and that group were really visually interesting directors. I don't get quite that same thing with Dominic Senna. Not bad, because he did, the year after this, he made Swordfish. I don't know if you ever saw that or not. It's a similar. It's
I
similar in
know
its
what
action
it
oriented.
is. Like
Yeah.
one of those, yeah, it's a pseudo heist / action
Mhm.
type thing.
And I mean, I'm a sucker for heist movies. I always have fun with them. This is
Oh, I
effectively
love
a heist movie,
movies.
but this is a very simplistic heist movie. And I remember at the time of seeing this, I saw this in theaters, and I remember the first time I saw it thinking, all right, that was fun. I had a good time. I didn't love the villain. And that was the weakest part of it for me, was Raymond Calitri as our big bad.
It's because the movie doesn't know who the antagonist is supposed to be.
That's true.
And it really struggles. Like, you've got the big mobster that is supposed to be like this grand overall threat, and we're supposed to be glad at the end that he gets killed. Spoilers, sorry.
Mhm.
But we see so little of him,
Yeah.
and his malice is so shoehorned that whether or not he gets killed, arrested, gets a slap on, I don't care. I don't know the guy. He's there in like 2 scenes,
Hmm.
and they do a very bad job of villainifying him. Like, oh, he's gonna execute the guy who failed on, like, he's doing very baseline garden variety mob stuff, and he likes wooden furniture. I like wooden furniture, so I'm having a lot of trouble hating the dude for it. It's like, yeah, a cool wooden desk is a lot better than some,
Yeah.
metal crap from Sib or whatever. I don't know. Like, they didn't give him a good kill the cat moment, so to speak.
Yeah. So it's Christopher Eccleston played him, and this was maybe the first thing I recall seeing him in. I might have seen something that he was in prior to this, but I don't remember it. But this, and then I would see
It
him.
felt like a waste of some good Eccleston.
Yeah. And I love his quote. He talked about, he said, he described this as a, quote, terrible film in which I give a terrible performance, adding that before Doctor Who, people would recognize him, mostly would shout at him, hey, you were in Gone in 60 Seconds, mate. You were shit. And I have to laugh because I was.
I don't think
And
he was. Like, it's not a terrible movie, and he didn't do a terrible job. I mean,
no.
he built a house out of Lego. It's not going to be a sturdy house,
Yeah.
but he was given Legos. What is he going to do?
And I have to wonder, because there was another thing I found, Will Patton, who plays Atlee Jackson, which is the one character name. No, there's 2 character names that cross over between the original 74 movie and this one. And it's Atlee Jackson for some reason, even though he's a completely different character. And
I need a refresher because there are so many freaking
yeah,
characters that blur together. Who was Jackson?
he was the guy played by Will Patton who shows up to get Nick Cage and bring him back into the fold. He was the one with the
Okay,
limp.
okay.
Um,
He's cookie cutter angry detective. Got it.
Cookie
Who
cutter,
the
angry,
ending of that
somewhat
character
mobster
I
guy.
cannot.
So his character, and then the character, and I'm using quotes there, of Eleanor, the car, is the only other
Mhm.
character that carries over. But Will Patton was cast in the role of Atlee Jackson 2 days before he arrived on set, and he asked the director, "Hey, when am I going to do my homework on this character?" And the guy said, "In front of the cameras." So some of these performances you can kind of figure they didn't have a whole
These
lot of
people are
time.
paid millions of dollars to do these jobs, and they are film student level incompetent. I'm sorry. By the way, I just for record, my relationship with Hollywood has worsened since the last time we talked. I am not impressed by a lot of
It's
what I see. So
a lot of it is because I mean, I'm sure that in a perfect world, Dominic Sena would have wanted his actors to have more time to actually like be ready for a role, and he's probably being pressured by producers and money people to be like, "You've got a budget, you've got time, let's go." And so that's how you end up casting somebody. Will Patton is not a bad actor, but in this, he's forgettable because he just didn't have any time to do anything. So he's just standard garden variety guy.
everyone in this movie is forgettable. They managed to make Angelina Jolie forgettable. Even Nicolas Cage does not shine to a Nicolas Cage degree in this film. And God, you can see him trying.
Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's not my favorite of Nicolas Cage's movies. I find other of his movies more enjoyable, but I have fun with this one. This is a movie that if somebody wants to watch it or it's on, I'll sit back and enjoy it because I can kind of have some mindless fun with it, and it's not offensive.
There are parts that are offensive.
Well, okay, yes, there are parts. I did have a note about the introduction of Donnie Chai McBride's character, when he's teaching the woman to drive. I was like, you know, in hindsight, granted,
Well,
the jokes he's making could literally be any person sitting in that car, but they chose to have the woman that they chose in that position. And I was like, that's something we wouldn't do now.
yeah, and the thing is, it's the fact that he's only there for that
Yeah.
that is boring to a certain degree. Because I know there's supposed to be jokes, yuck yuck, but they don't land. And I know it's probably just, it's not even a question of sensibilities or just, modern points of view. It just, these are jokes that we've heard so many times, especially if you're Gen X like I am, that they started with a very dull edge and now they're just
Yeah.
background noise to a certain degree. But it's just that you've got this character, like it feels like the kind of movie that would have a quirk of bringing her back in certain fashion. Like I expected during the last chase that one of the cop cars would hit her car
Oh, see,
as kind of like a callback.
that would have been funny.
And I feel that's what a director would have done or a screenwriter would have kind of hinted at. Nothing like that. The movie in a lot of ways feels sterile of that kind of like verisimilitudes and callbacks. It's disappointing.
Yeah, I think too. My watching it this time, I did notice it's a little overstuffed. There's things that didn't need to be there that serve no purpose that could have been just gotten rid of. There's like okay, so you've got Nick Cage plays Randall Memphis Raines, who's a car thief and retired. His younger brother is Giovanni Ribisi, Kip Raines, and basically Kip got himself in too deep, failed, and now he's got kind of a bounty. And Memphis has to come back to steal 50 cars in. He's given 3 days, but then ends up doing it in a
He
single night.
messes around so much. Like every time he talks to someone, it's like, oh, we've got so little time, so little time. Let me go to a diner and waste 7 hours dicking around doing nothing. Like
And
by the time we get this even started for scouting, which we need 24 hours to do, will be so low on time. And I guess they have a good plot device as to why they're doing it like that, because they're going to do all the hits at once.
Mhm.
Then I feel like they shoot themselves in the foot again by making the bounty 50 cars. Make
Yeah.
it 15 cars and make each car interesting instead of 50 and having 40 of them forgettable.
Yeah,
and
and
point.
that was the original did 48 cars, I think. So they're not that different from what was originally done in the movie. But between the family stuff with the Raines brothers and all of that, and then you have the police are on his tail. Okay, I get that. You got car thieves. You're going to have the cops involved. I do like.
Makes sense.
I
Absolutely
like.
acceptable.
Yeah, and I like Delroy Lindo and Timothy Oliphant. This is actually, I think, the second movie because Timothy Oliphant I had seen in Scream 2 prior to this, and then he shows up here. Of course, he went on to be Raylan Givens in Justified,
Mhm.
and he's had quite a career. But I liked him in this. I liked them as cops. But then you have the big mobster that they got to deal with. We've talked about already, Raymond Calitri, and he's basically in a scene and then forgotten until the very end. And then, oh yeah, remember that guy? We got to deal with him now. But you also had the rival car thief, Johnny B, at one point,
Right.
played by Master P. That was completely pointless. Watching it this time around, I'm
It
like,
serves no
why?
purpose. It doesn't even drive the plot.
No, it
As many
brings it
things
to a
don't
halt.
drive the plot. Yeah. Everything like, oh, we got some momentum. Johnny B shows up to just freaking put the brakes on everything. A couple of explosions later, he's gone. Who cares?
Yeah. So I didn't love that. And
then you've got the whole, I guess, love story with.
Yeah, that was another one
mean-
that they wanted to hint at, and I think in a different movie they might spend more time on that.
You mentioned producer interference, and definitely some marketing dude, some idiot executive said you need to have a romantic subplot or else the women won't go see the cars.
Right.
Which is dumb. It goes against most of the research.
Yeah.
Even at the time, like we're talking about this is post 1999. Like we're done. We're done with that kind of mentality. So this is very backwards Hollywood, which transpires to today. So they're still demanding that. It is shoehorned in a way that is so inorganic. Like, and there are some scenes like when she's at the end, she's sucking on the other dude's fingers. Like, we don't know who this character is.
Yeah.
Like, is she Nick Cage's romantic interest? Is she just like this girl that hangs out and likes provoking people? Like, what's her specialty in the heist? Because apart from showing up in her bar because she's the old flame, we don't even get a good like son of a bitch, I'm in moment. Like there's like she shows up on a bike at some point. It's like, I guess so. Like it feels like these scenes were filmed at the very end of production and just like kind of edited in because again, like some dickhead producer said we need a love plot.
Yeah, there is a good bit of that, and it overstuffed because there's just so many characters, right? So you got these subplots that don't need to be there. Like trim out Johnny B, doesn't need to be there at all. We can get rid of that.
When Kip shows up with just like a dozen idiots, I just like at that moment you go, oh man, no, this I cannot. Like there's already too many people, and this I know he's supposed to be the dickhead brother, but I hope in the next 10 seconds Nick Cage fires all of them and maybe keeps one or two interesting. No, everyone stays. It's like too many cooks.
It's a lot of characters to follow, and
few of them are interesting enough to be worth following.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, like I get Angelina Jolie being there, and the Kip and his crew was so you had Kip, you had his buddy Mirror Man, who's the electronics expert, but then like doesn't do anything really with electronics throughout the movie.
Toby is the hacker dude. Again, a bunch of scenes that don't matter.
Yeah, the having a hacker, having somebody doing computer stuff for them as the younger guy makes sense, but he does like one thing and then he spends the rest of the movie wanting to be involved and being told not to, and then he throws a huge wrench into everything.
It makes sense, but he's doing the stupid hacker thing. Like here's the thing, like even today, like no one would hire, like you're trying to steal cars, you need access to the DMV, you need access to insurance information. You're not hiring a hacker sitting behind his computer doing Trojan horse dumb shit. I'm sorry, am I swearing too much?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. No, you pay off someone at the DMV. You pay off someone at the insurance. You do what the other dude did at the DMV where he's paying for information,
Mm-hmm.
because that is simpler. If you do it well, less traceable, and also like, again, more realistic. No, hacking is 99% social engineering, 1% actual computer work.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating to see a useless scene done badly.
But you know, it was late 90s, early 2000s. You have to have your hacker there, so they had him. But my problem with him is that then he's only in the
Do
movie.
you need to have your hacker? Like, is the hacker demographic just storming the cinemas because they heard there was going to be one of them?
It's more of that's what the people think they want.
Yeah,
everyone to see.
it's again,
But
skewed, dumb, incompetent market research.
But my issue with Toby was that he then throws a wrench into everything by wanting to be involved, and Kip being like, "No, you're not going to be involved," and then he stows away and gets them caught and shot. Like that was what
Which
he
gets
was in the movie
resolved
for.
instantly.
Yes,
It is not a conflict worth having.
not really. No,
The main character doesn't even need to be involved. It just solves itself in the background. It's wind in the trees.
kind of, yeah. You're not wrong there. Then you had like Freb, the other guy who's kind of just there. He's the one that can order pizza really well.
I know them more for their jobs than their names.
He was the one that couldn't do anything, and they even mentioned
yeah, pizza dude.
Yeah, Pizza Boy.
Okay, another one that, man.
You know, and the worst part is, like, these are actors that I recognize from other movies. Toby was a kid that he shows up in Identity a few years later, which is a John Cusack movie that I love. And the guy playing Freb, James Duvall, not related to our other Duvall,
Some other
Robert
Duvall.
Duvall. But James Duvall was actually in Donnie Darko. He played Frank, the rabbit. He was the guy in the rabbit suit. So, like,
Could have been anyone, though.
It could have been anyone, but I remember him specifically. But and then you had Scott Kahn showing up here. This was early in his career, but he's the guy who can drive anything, right? So you got all these, like, it's just so many characters they could have, like, meshed into one.
There's a dude who can drive anything, and at no point do we have an undrivable car that he gets to drive because he can drive anything.
Yeah.
It's absurd. Like, this premise with this amount of character, with these different this could have been, like, give me a 10-episode, Netflix series with that kind of stuffing in it. But for a movie, it doesn't work.
It's tough. It really is to put that much in a movie that's like an hour and 46 minutes. So it's not like it's a long movie, and it's pacing. I will say this, with the exception of when Master P shows up as Johnny B for the couple of times he shows up, that brings things to a halt. Outside of that, I feel like the pacing is all right. They keep things moving on you.
Well, it's because they're doing it very much in a Street Magician kind of way, because they're moving too fast.
Pardon me.
So that's the thing. Like, they've always got one hand doing something while the other hand's preparing to do something else.
Yeah.
So I feel like the magic act is to trick us into thinking that there's good pacing, but the truth is there isn't. That's the trick. The pacing is shit.
That's the magic. And I was curious to get your take on this as a writer, because you're going to notice a lot of things that general audience may not, and even I, as a movie lover, may not notice in terms of, like, structure or character. Like, some of it I do. I know, like, most of these characters are two-dimensional at best. They're character traits given name, in a lot of ways, if that. which
And I feel that I think the director basically like he went, okay, you're a hacker, dude, act hackery, and the actors did a lot. Like I feel like the screenwriter and the director deserve absolutely no credit for whatever success happened with this movie, and everything rested like as much as I spit on the idea of all these characters. For the most part, the actors themselves did the very best with the crumbs they were given. And all credit to them. And I have a feeling I don't think the director sat down with Pizza Dude and like gave him, okay, you need to be very insecure about the fact that you're just a pizza dude. Like I think he just screamed Pizza Dude and just moved on. Like I don't think he gave it any thought, and that was all on the actor to create the character from essentially nothing.
it kind of does have that feel, doesn't it? Like even Vinnie Jones as Sphinx is just there to be like the big silent muscle, and then of course the
All right,
joke.
let's take an aside. Sphinx and the other dude, I could have watched 2 hours just those guys.
I mean, I love Vinnie Jones, and I love this character
Mhm.
because of he just gets to be big and menacing, and then the whole joke at the end when he starts talking, they're like, "I thought you were from Long Beach."
But that's the thing. Like the moment he shows up not talking, you've already got a good vibe for what this movie is trying to be, and you go at the end he talks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Except I thought at the end when he's going to talk, it's going to matter. It's going to impact the plot.
Mm.
Like most things that are inserted should impact the plot, and it doesn't. It's just a throwaway gag that lands relatively flat because it's so predictable.
So you're expecting more of like a like Silent Bob type thing where he has one line to say, but it's something at least poignant to the plot or somewhat profound for a character. Like that was the thing when Kevin Smith would
Again,
write
like
Silent Bob, it worked, right? Because he would do that.
yeah, and like have him intercept a cop by talking to him to slow them down. Like have these moments from all these characters help when Memphis is trying to escape the cops.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways of doing that. I mean, at some point, like they hint that they have like the radio call signs of all these people. Have Sphinx freaking call someone on the radio. Like have all of these little traits, all these little moments that become throwaway gags that mean nothing, have an impact on the plot. If you're asking me, like, what's one of the biggest problems with this movie is that they stuff in so much, and then they don't even use it. Like they bring this massive, overwhelming toolbox, and then they just empty it on the floor and don't use a single thing. Like they grab one very, very interesting screwdriver, which is Nick Cage, and they screw around with that.
Mm-hmm. And I can't dispute that because I do see where they could have done so much more with what this idea, right? Because it's a very simple idea of like guy who did a thing really well, left it for personal reasons, and now he gets pulled back in to do one more job. Like that's the trope. He's got to do this one more job to save some family.
Fine trope.
Nothing wrong with any of that. But I like the analogy of like a big toolbox full of stuff and they just dump everything out, grabbed one thing and sort of used it. Because I love like the cast in this I've seen in other things and they're all great. This has 3 Academy Award winners in it, by the way. Because you've got Nick Cage, Angelina Jolie, and Robert Duvall.
I just said anything good about this movie is the actors.
Yeah. And to the actors' credit, they bring stuff. You mentioned that a lot of them are kind of forgettable. I think they're forgettable characters, but there's moments and performances that are great.
They're not given material to shine with.
No, not really, unfortunately. And some of that is just too many of them to get enough screen time to do anything. Because they give a fair amount to Vinnie Jones with Sphinx, but you could use more. You could give more to Jolie. I think the Kip and his crew could have been cut down and kind of mashed together because I do want to see Tumblr, Scott Kahn. I want to see him drive something. We see him driving a minivan in suburbia. Like that's basically
give me a car that is notoriously difficult to drive and have him do incredible stuff with it for 10 seconds.
Yeah, he's kind of there to make a couple of jokes and be the contact for the keys for the Mercedes cars. that
There's an entire scene in a construction area with a bunch of machines notorious for being each very peculiar on how to operate.
yeah.
Why isn't he there using a crane to push a cop car in the way of another? Like, I don't know how you get him there, but that's the screenwriter's job. Instead of inserting a character, giving him a trait, and then going, meh, whatever, yo.
Remember that guy? Yeah, he's not going to do anything. And I think
Like,
that
was the key guy and the hacker guy the same guy? Because I feel like they could have been.
They could have been, but they weren't. They should have been. Like, consolidate these things and give us more, because it's a simple story, but they complicate it with just too much stuff and too much it's a lot of frosting and not a lot of cake.
Yeah, and what makes a heist movie interesting is that you do have a lot of moving parts. The whole point, like a heist story is about having a puzzle where you don't understand where any of the pieces go,
Mhm.
and at the end they form a perfect image.
Yeah.
Like, no pieces are left aside. The picture is exactly what it should be, and it's also kind of surprising because you didn't expect the pieces to fit where they go. And this starts like that. It's a heist movie. You've got the trope, the guy had one more job. You got the whole, getting the crew back together, which is kind of sad because he's got this whole list of his own crew getting back together, and he gets 3 people.
Yeah.
Which, in a way, I found kind of cool because it does bring out the idea that we're all retired.
Mm-hmm.
And they do make a point, like, a lot of these people have just moved on. And
Moved
that's cool.
on or in prison or dead.
And in a certain way, maybe having him then turn to his brother and saying, hey, I'm missing these holes, fill them, or something. Like, there's ways of making this more interesting. But the thing is, at the end, like, you start with all these puzzles, and at the end, like, you just need 4 pieces to make the image, and everything else is a waste.
Yeah, and it also, I do love the idea of like the one car, the unicorn, the one car he always has trouble trying to steal, right? So you make that your Eleanor, 67 Shelby GT 500. That's cool. I do wish that car chase had been a little bit better. It's good, but it's not great.
It's fine. I still. When do we talk about the helicopter?
Go for it. Bring it up.
First of all, okay, this car chase, like you say, could have been better. Like, there's certain moments that are interesting, like the part where the car doesn't start. Like, he has his bad luck moment, which isn't on the scale that you kind of expect it to be.
Right.
But I get it. Like, my dad used to have like an old Triumph Spitfire 76. Had like clutch issues. Like, old cars are great. They don't necessarily always age well.
Sure.
As far as the mechanics are concerned. What really frustrated me is the helicopter. First of all, why is it flying so low? And I know the answer, because it looks cool. But then, the car, first of all, by some miracle, he's got NOS in his car, which is, I guess it is Fast and Furious. Lucky him, he's got NOS. And it's punching to 140, maybe 160 miles an hour. Oh my God, he's totally going to lose the helicopter. That 2 options. Could go up to keep an eye, like a bird's eye view of the situation, as a helicopter is good to do. Also, this is an A-star EQA. It's a squirrel. They're used for traffic and this sort of thing because they're very agile. And they have a speed ranging between 250 and 280 miles an hour. It can freaking keep up with a goddamn car easily, no problem. Especially if it gets a little bit of altitude, so it doesn't have to deal with obstacles. Not even an issue.
Yeah, it's
so dumb.
I got having air support, but I think the problem is that if they use it realistically,
air support. It was a helicopter at ground level.
Well, yes, I mean,
you might as well have a boat just going by the side too, because they had the budget to rent one. Just have a fjord next to it.
I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, it was a car movie in LA, so of course they have to go in the river, right, in the spillway.
Yes.
Like, that's a contractual obligation. But I get the idea of
if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I get the idea of like the LAPD bringing in Air One, right, and getting a bird's eye view. But then you're right, they don't use it as how they would. That
No.
that would have stayed up high to relay location information, not
Exactly.
actively try
The
to
whole
pursue
point
him.
is for the helicopter to tell you where the car is so that other units can intercept. But unfortunately, because that's the thing, like, whenever you ever watched a car chase on YouTube or any kind of anywhere where the suspect gets away, I think it happens like once or twice out of the hundreds of videos available.
Yeah.
Because usually you get the chopper being able to say, "No, he's turning there.
Yep.
Now he's going there.
Exactly.
All right, set the blockade there. All right, we got him." Like,
And-
the only thing that's fun about these car chases is when the guy actually stops the car and starts running, it's tackled to the ground with
Right.
the sack of potatoes.
Well, the other part of it too was the helicopter is trying to give them at one point that information when he's on the pier, but none of the information being relayed from that helicopter made any sense. At one point, he said he's traveling westbound, go east to intercept, but he didn't say where they were, because then the next thing he says is, "Oh, he's turned around and now he's heading towards you." Well, why were you telling him to go in the opposite direction? So that felt like a lot of technobabbly chatter that they just sort of edited together to make it sound like he was doing the job properly. That bugged me this time around, I think, more than I remember. Just because
Yeah, it is.
like none of it made any sense, and I couldn't get a good enough. So in an action movie, and I've talked about this before, in an action sequence, you need to understand the geography of where the action is taking place. I
But
personally,
that's difficult to do, Travis, because you need, in a way, to have kind of like, you can't overlay a map or have a way of seeing all the streets. That, oh wait, you could, because you could get the point of view of a helicopter. They literally had a narrative device in the movie that could have helped with exactly what you're describing, and instead they're having it go, "Oh no, he used NOS. I can't catch up."
and I wonder,
With a chopper.
it is when, if you really think about it, it is incredibly ridiculous. But I wonder how much of that is Dominic Senna's music video background, and sort of, because a music video is effectively, it's very often not telling a story. It's just images to go with the song. The song is maybe telling a story. There might be some in there, but it's very loose. And I wonder how much of that influenced decisions being made on this, because there's a lot of flashy cutting and there is some visually interesting shots, but they're not like Michael Bay, for all of his faults as a director. I do think he's actually a very good visual storyteller, because he has a way of you understanding what's going on where in a lot of his movies. At least, especially early on, things like The Rock and Bad Boys, and Armageddon, you usually had a good sense of sort of where what was happening was going on.
I think it has to do with also the pieces that you're given. Like, I understand the drive to say, okay, we're doing an action movie. It needs to be very visually interesting. And we've got this really visually talented video clip director. Let's bring him on board. But you need these people to have an extremely solid screenplay to work from.
Yeah.
Because they are not, it's no offense to them on a personal level, but they don't have the skills or the experience to patch up a weak screenplay or an average screenplay. They need something rock solid that they can learn from as far as storytelling is concerned, and build upon and bring their visually artistic point of view. And I think that's what killed Alien 3. Like, David Fincher, talented director, came in, probably had a fairly decent script, and then everything started falling apart, and he was the one left to patch up the pieces with none of the skills to do it. And that's how we got like a visually interesting, very shoddily told story for Alien 3.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I think not enough people watching or critiquing film think about, is like, you can be good at certain aspects of it, but you're not going to be great at all of them all the time. And if you don't have something solid to build on, it is a house of cards, and it is just going to fall apart on you. So
Filmmaking it's a gestalt effort, and a lot of people forget that. Like, we think Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds, like, oh, it's Ryan Reynolds top to bottom. No, there's hundreds of people, and if a dozen of them do an excellent job, it's going to elevate the movie. If another doesn't do a terrible job, it can sink it. And these are could be names you've never heard of, or they could be the director, an assistant director, an executive, like so many people. But the problem is, we as people in general, we're a little bit lazy when it comes to our entertainment. So we like to have a figurehead, and movie critics are even lazier than we are. And this is their day job, so they get bored with it too. So when you're asking him to actually critique a movie, it's like, oh man, a lot of people involved. I can't be bothered. It's going to be that guy.
Yeah.
And it's either his fault that it's great, or it's his fault that it sucks, whichever. I don't care.
Yeah.
Paycheck.
I mean, take a look at somebody like the Coen brothers. Like they make interesting movies, but they also have great cinematographers that they've worked with. And they're able.
A director of photography can change so much.
Oh, absolutely. You get a good director of photography on a film and it can elevate or bring it down. I mean, for instance, I love Halloween, 1978, right? And John Carpenter, very good director. I enjoy his work. But a good part of what made Halloween work so well is Dean Cundey as the director of photography. He and John and they all worked together to make something that looked so much better than the small budget they had to make that. So
yeah, and it's the reason also why you see so many very successful directors or screenwriters like kind of follow the same crew and always bring the same people around them, because once you have an entourage that you know can be the ingredients to the recipe that works, you want to have them along.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it makes a difference when you have that too, because you can develop that shorthand with them, and it's much easier to have a cohesive vision with somebody you've worked with before. So that makes a huge difference too, which is why like this movie I think is a lot of fun, but it definitely isn't perfect. And some of that is inexperience from a director. I think the screenwriter for this, Scott Rosenberg, ended up leaving the project because he didn't like some changes that were being made. I don't know fully. That's not uncommon, and I can kind of see that happening.
This movie stinks of studio interference.
It does, doesn't it? Like
there's a lot of places where you go, man, is this kid there because like he's dating the daughter of one producer? Like what's going on?
And Jerry Bruckheimer as a producer has a style. And you definitely can tell, like I can tell a Bruckheimer movie when I see it, right? From going all the way back to things like Top Gun, but on through the 90s, so many of his movies, and it's like, yep, that's a Bruckheimer movie. And I know that just the feel of it. So that this has that too, him being involved. And I'm sure that it's sort of, think of like some of the directors that have signed on to and then left, like say Marvel projects in recent years, where they get a director. Edgar Wright was supposed to and was working on the first Ant-Man movie, and he left because he didn't agree with kind of the direction that they were going in. So you get those creative differences. I feel like Bruckheimer was that back in the 90s, where he had his style. Marvel has their style now. So it happens. You're right. This does have the stink of like a lot of studio interference to it. It is a PG-13 movie, but I think they aimed to do that. I don't think this was one where they like toned back an R-rated one to make this.
I mean, going back to the studio interference, I think a lot of it is just like someone just screaming broad appeal, 4 quadrants, like over and over again, like a broken record. By the way, a broken record, I mean, back in the day, kids, records were actually these vinyl things, and when they were broken, they tend to skip and just repeat the same line. I'm old.
I do think that in some ways, the PG-13 broad appeal of this does make it at least rewatchable, because there's not too much of it that is aged super poorly. Because they didn't try to push things too far, if that makes sense. Like, because it's a little bit sanitized.
No, there is no effort to be edgy. There's no effort to be edgy or innovative. Like
which, it's a double-edged sword, right? It can be real good, but it can also maybe not age very well, or not land the same way years down the road.
No,
so like, it's like, do you which side of that coin do you want to end up on? And they chose the safer bet. But it's still, for the tropiness of this, I enjoy it. I still have fun with it all the time because of the silliness. Like, it's just dumb. They're trying to steal 50 cars in one night. Like,
it's a fun ride.
Mhm.
And I feel there's two ways of looking at like my critique of it. On one end, I feel it's a fun ride that just keeps getting interrupted. Like,
Okay.
like say you're playing a really cool video game and your parents keep calling and you have to pause all the time.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
game will feel less fun. Or it's like a roller coaster that whenever it starts really getting some speed, it just slows down again, but not for a loop or like a cool, nothing happens. Like, it just slows down to slow down. And the other part of it is I feel that if I had gone in there with, say, less of a critical eye, that's one thing of noticing. Like, the more stories I write, the more like I tend to just look for things that are broken. But I look for things that are broken, things that are good, and I try to also look for the potential that's wasted, because that's where ideas come from. Like, say, I could see a longer story with this character. Well, I can write that longer story with a similar character and kind of go for that vibe. So I feel that may damage the movie a little bit for me, but it's not like I regret seeing it or didn't enjoy it. It's just there's so many things that you go, oh, why did they do this? Like
Yeah.
the whole like dog eating the keys thing. It's like, you have other storylines that are underdeveloped.
Yeah.
Focus on that. I don't need to hear about. I don't need the dog shitting thing. Like, explain to me better in a more compelling and interesting way why I should care for the relationship between Angelina Jolie and Nick Cage in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, the dog thing definitely feels like we need some sort of a dog joke here, and then you can have the joke of
Again,
like
four quadrants. We need something for the kids.
Yeah.
The kids love dog shit.
I will say this
Yes.
though, I had completely forgotten that the guys that roll up on him while they're waiting for the dog to take a dump, that the one that's talking to him is Michael Pena, who
Oh shit, really?
like
I know
he's just a
this.
baby face Michael Pena, and for whatever reason, I'd always thought that it was there's another actor who's basically anytime you needed a Hispanic gangster, you would call this guy. Is Noel, and I can't remember his last name, but like you've seen him in just about any movie that's had a Hispanic gangster in it, and for some reason I thought it was him. That's what I remembered, but maybe it's just because I saw him in so many other movies as that same character, and then I see babyface Michael Pena, and I'm like, holy crap, he looks like he's about 14.
Now, I got to give the movie credit for one thing.
Okay.
Location in a lot of stories becomes a character.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to give this movie credit for making LA look at no point pretty or interesting, making it one of the most realistic representation of Los Angeles I've ever seen on film.
I like that.
Oh no, I love that.
Yeah, like it's not
the
glamorous.
times I've been in LA, I've always it's like looking behind the mask. This city is ugly and not fun and not interesting. But every time you see it on film, it's like glamour and fun and oh my god, it's such a pretty architecture. They have like 3 cool buildings. Everything else is stucco. It's an ugly city and it's not even a fun city. They have good Tex-Mex, I guess. That's it. So having they didn't even make Long Beach look cool, and I thought Long Beach looked prettier when I saw it. So kudos on making LA the most realistic vision of LA I've seen since, I don't know, give me a dystopian movie and set in LA.
It's kind of like when I watched The Fisher King, and my guest for that was from New York, and he said one of the things he liked about that movie was that it actually looked like New York, and they shot it there, which helps. But like, there is something to an authenticity when you can shoot something somewhere and you make it look like the place you're at, right? Like, it's one I understand when you can't afford to shoot in New York, so you shoot in Toronto, and you try to make Toronto look like New York.
But it's mostly also just about the characterization of the city. Because a lot of whether we like it or not, like movies are made in LA. So the ones that are shot in LA, they do try to give like the tourist brochure treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Which is frustrating when you've actually seen what this city looks like. So having it be grimy and having it be like dirty and having like the architecture that sucks. Like, all right, like that's LA. Like, in traffic, that's terrible. Not just as a punchline, but as a plot point.
Yeah. Yep. And I didn't mention him earlier, but I did very much like Robert Duvall as the old wise Otto. He's given up his crime ways. He's restoring cars now.
The line where he says, like, I used to be a destroyer, now I'm a restorer,
Yeah.
or something. Like, it's very good. Like, it's also the kind of thing you kind of expect from someone who loves car and used to have a chop shop and now restores them. Like the evolution of that kind of character.
And
I like that.
They have that great moment where they sit down and play the tape of like the engine, and they just talk about like, oh, because they would know an engine so well they could just listen to it and tell you what car it was, type of thing.
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, I thought the moment was a little cheesy, but at the same time, it does work for what it's meant to do.
Yeah, it is cheesy, but I think it's purposefully cheesy. So I can let that go.
Has great chemistry with Nick Cage in there.
Oh yeah,
like you believe that these two characters used to work together and have that kind of relationship. Like it's seamless, especially compared to some of the other relationships. I mean, Cage also carries the relationship with Kip, and I don't think the actor who played Kip managed to really like give off the same vibe, but Nick Cage really like he's convincing in a Big Brother role.
He is, and Giovanni Ribisi, not a bad actor, but I think he's a very method style actor, and if he doesn't have a whole lot of time,
he would need to have been adopted by Nick Cage's parents to actually make that work.
Probably. He famously, so he was in a movie a few years after this called Basic with John Travolta and Sam Jackson, and he's playing an army private, I think, and they have some sort of a training accident or whatever. But in the movie, his character was supposed to have been like lost out in the wilderness for a couple of days and then brought into a hospital. And there was some sort of behind the scenes thing where he didn't bathe for days because his character wouldn't have or something. Like he kind of went, and it is a little bit, but I wonder how sweaty and how smelly he was making this movie, because his character
probably enough that the other actors should have just beaten him.
And it's just one of those things that now when I know stories like that, and then I see certain actors, I just wonder that. It's same with like watching Daniel Day-Lewis in something. You just wonder like, boy, what was that like? Because I was listening to an episode of a podcast where they had Tim Blake Nelson on. He was talking about making Lincoln. And he said that making Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, you were just, he's like, I was just in the room with the president of the United States. Like he never was Daniel Day-Lewis the entire time they were there. He was in character the whole time, which is both.
I used to love the idea behind like the whole method acting thing, like really being into it. But the more I think about it from a professional point of view and from a skill set point of view and an expectation point of view, the more I really revile it. Like
insufferable, I think, is the word.
You're a professional actor. You should be like, it should be part of your skill set to turn this thing off and act like a professional amongst your peers. Like if you're playing a hobo and you need to come to set smelling like shit to be convincing to yourself, maybe you're not that great an actor. Maybe you need to work on your acting. Like you need to be able to act like you smell like shit without actually smelling like shit.
That was I think it was Gary Oldman on, I want to say it was Air Force One, had the line something to do with like he would be, because Gary Oldman's a great villain, but then when they would cut, he would just go back to being Gary Oldman and be fine. And,
yeah, like an actor.
It was just one of those things. But yeah, I agree with you that Cage carries the relationship between Memphis and Kip. Although,
and I'm not saying like the actor who plays Kip is a bad actor. Like he looks young, so I'm assuming he was probably not like as advanced in his career as Robert Duvall and Nick Cage are.
No, it was still fairly early in his career. I think too, though, again, it's sort of time. I don't think there was a lot of time given to him to find that character, but also he doesn't have a ton of screen time with Cage.
Right.
For that being the main...
He's there to scream because he's getting crushed and then being competent a few times.
Yeah, and like that's the type of thing, again, where I think the movie would have been better served to really foster and build that relationship. Give us more of that. We need that relationship. We need the cops chasing them, and we need our big bad. But we don't need the love interest. We don't need the rival car thief, and we don't need a dozen other people in the crew.
Here's the thing. I don't think we need the big bad to be that important because he's never going to have the screen time to do it correctly. Like, the big bad should remain somewhat faceless. Like, in a, oh, you know, if we don't get these cars, the mafia's going to kill Kip. Why? Because that's how they do. Like, we don't need him to love furniture. We don't need him to have like this elaborate, we put people in cars and get him crushed. Like, efficiency, like no theatrics.
Okay, yeah.
And then you can play a bit more with the cops. Like, you can have your guy who's super obsessed trying to get to get Nick Cage or Memphis. Like, have him be more interesting, have him be more nuanced, have him be a bad cop that is too obsessed. Like, there's so many ways, like, or maybe like that's his last case and he needs to retire after that. Like, there's so many avenues you can take if you take the time to develop it correctly, that he can become a much more interesting antagonist, which you then can avoid having the really weird fishtail ending where he goes, I guess you just saved my life. You're free to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly not going to be any paperwork involved in that. I'm not getting fired. No vehicles were destroyed on my way here, trying to catch specifically you that I'm letting walk somehow.
Not only that, but he's also
good luck with all the cars that probably caught up to me now. Like, this building is certainly not surrounded by half of the LAPD.
Yeah, at the location,
which is not a notoriously violent police department either.
Right, and at the location that the homicide cop specifically told this Grand Theft Auto cop to not go to.
There will be no consequences.
None whatsoever.
Don't worry about it. You saved my life by pushing the suspect into, like, down to his death. We will never get a confession. We're getting nothing. Like, who was he selling these cars to? Who knows? He's dead.
Right.
But don't worry about it. You saved my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one, too, that this time around I was like, ooh, okay, we're doing... I forgot we did
like, oh, man, the runtime on this move is getting a bit high. Just let him go.
Yep, it's fine. But having said that, there's just some moments in this that just make me... They tickle me, or there's lines that I actually still use. Like, early in the movie, the first thing we get is Kip and his crew rolling up on the Porsche dealership, and he gets out and he's like, I got to get my tool. And he grabs a brick out of the back of the car. And it's
which, for the record, I had seen that scene about 3 times without even knowing what movie it was from. I don't know where I saw it.
That's hilarious. But I just love the reaction of,
man, that's not a tool. That's a damn brick.
And then he walks across the street and just chucks it through the door. Something that no car thief would actually ever do, right? Like, you wouldn't do that. You want to be silent. You want to not be noticed. You're making a huge deal out of it all, but it's fine.
And afterwards, like, they're trying to convince us, oh, you'd understand, like, he's Memphis's little brother. He really looked up to him and tried to do the same thing by being the absolute bluntest idiot.
Right.
Like, oh, I didn't. You can't blame me for using a brick. I didn't have the best role model for this. Oh, wait. I literally am the little brother of a legendary car thief that I looked up to and studied from my youth.
A legendary car thief, by the way, that is so well known that beat cops 6 years after he retired recognize him.
Visually recognize him in the diner.
Yes. That was just amazing.
It's fine, brick.
But he throws the brick through. I did like, though, when they get into the car and they sit down, and then Mirror Man says to him,
"Okay, Billy Badass."
For whatever reason, I just like that as a Billy Badass.
In the movie. There are good lines in this movie.
I mean, I use this.
There are good lines that aren't. I say, like, there's today. There's a Joss Whedonification of Hollywood one-liners, where they never fit in the scene. They're always funny because they're idiosyncratic and weird. Like, they're very cartoony. They're badly written is what I'm getting at. And, like, those were some good one-liners.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes a little bit out of place, but never like a guy after a massacre saying, I'm okay, out of nowhere. Like,
sure. Yeah.
Anyways.
But even, like, I use this a lot if I'm driving around somewhere and I don't know where I am, and it's just...
Lost in suburbia hell, where are we?
I'm constantly lost in suburbia hell. And it's...
I mostly just use the word tabarnak, but
And
that's a French Canadians.
also, to be fair,
word.
a lot of those suburban places, they do all look the same. It just looks like the
Oh,
same
yeah,
thing
no.
over and over, and it's terrible.
There used to be a comic from a Quebec comic where they had a sort of suburbia depicted, and it was just called Bungalopolis, like Metropolis, but with bungalows. It's just infinity same houses.
Oh. Oh, that would drive me crazy.
I mean, these exist.
I know. You kind of mentioned it already, but like the having the big bad have some sort of weird quirk was also a thing for a while, and this one felt like the weakest of them. Like we've got our gangster, and he's got to have some sort of thing. Ooh, we'll make him be the Carpenter. So they literally are like,
Name Raymond
okay, well, back up.
They call him the Carpenter.
okay, that's
It could have been worse because, I mean, as far as tropes from that time, it was. I'm glad they went with the Carpenter because it could have been the insert disability here,
yeah,
or just queer coded like to a cartoon level.
yeah. That's very
which
true.
was tradition at the time.
Mm-hmm. Instead, he just likes making furniture. It's a good hobby. It's a good hobby to have.
Very PG. It's very PG. But it doesn't make me hate him.
No.
I also like carpentry. I like watching people make wooden stuff on YouTube.
And the thing about it is, like, it
I
only
watch his YouTube.
because he's only in the two scenes. It's only brought up when he says that he likes wooden furniture, and then when Memphis grabs the table and uses it to like just somewhat distract him, like he's going to drop it, and that's a huge thing for him.
He likes furniture. He's not pathological about it. I feel like he still would have kind of stabbed him.
I mean,
More so.
you would think so.
Like, it's not like that chair was Eleanor.
No, that's very true.
Which should have been Eleanor should have been one of the things that, like, one of the notes I had, like that whole thing should have been foreshadowed back when he was still at his go-kart place. Having him just have, like, I don't know, a hubcap, a piece of that car, of one of those cars that he tried to steal but kept as a memento.
That would have been cool.
And just like looking at it as like when he's considering going back, like the moment where he's trying to make the decision, am I going, am I not going? Like there's certain ways to foreshadow these things in a visual medium that they just didn't care to do.
Yeah. It did, however, lead to a great exchange between Calitri and Rains, and I just like this because it's an honest answer, and I appreciate honesty.
Do I look like an arsehole?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So then he throws.
I mean, I
money back
disagree.
at
I think Eccleston doesn't look like an asshole, but
no, not at all.
But I admire the answer. Like if you're gonna quip back.
So here was a scene that it didn't fit. Like they're supposed to be on this time crunch, right? They've only got 48 hours and they're spending half of it researching the cars. But then we do get the silly, funny scene where he goes to the Ferrari dealership and he talks to the Ferrari dealer.
That is a good.
And you get Roger. So I love that.
Two Rogers don't make a right.
Like just terrible, but it's got a great Nick Cage laugh. So, but when he's like, no, I've seen 3 of these parked outside the local Starbucks or whatever. And then he says, but if I had, and then he names like a very specific car. And the guy says,
You would not be a self-indulgent wiener, sir. You would be a connoisseur.
Precisely.
I never noticed how bad that ADR is in that quote. The word wiener was absolutely recorded at a different time than the rest of that line. And
possibly over another worse word.
Yes, I believe so. It was probably one where they're
probably dick.
I don't think we're going to get that one past the board. Let's cut that one.
Yes, someone from was it MPAA?
Yeah,
like, probably sent a note like, you've already got a lot of dog shit. You're gonna have to remove one dick.
Yeah, somewhere you're gonna have to do that. I I did love. So I mentioned how like Delroy Lindo and Timothy Olyphant, the cops, they have a couple of fun moments. Like you have that moment where they confront Rains outside. Was it the bar
Diner.
or the diner or whatever? They find him on the street. Oh, it was after he saw his mom. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And they're talking to him, and he says something to the effect of like, then I got to tell my wife about this. That I lost a stupid bet, and his partner's like, yeah, and she's kind of mean, and he says, she's mean or whatever, and he gets that look, and then it's just after he leaves, after Rains walks away, and you get,
Who's Eleanor?
It's a damn car. I don't ever talk about my wife.
like, I do like that trope of somebody who says something self-deprecating and their friend or partner who thinks they're in on the joke, and then it's like, no, you don't say that. I don't know why, that just makes me laugh.
Because it feels real.
It does.
Like there's a hierarchy of insults. Like I can get away insulting some of my friends,
Mm-hmm.
that other people will not. Like but there's always that one dude who thinks that because he hears an inside joke that it's just free game for everyone.
And so it made for like it made their partnership feel like two actual partners instead of just,
they're not friends, they're coworkers.
Yeah, exactly. And then Timothy Olyphant does have the great moment, which is during the car chase when a police SUV gets behind Eleanor and then gets hit by the wrecking ball. Now, first of all, the guy driving that SUV,
that guy is dead. That guy is
100% dead because it hit driver's side on the door.
Before you go into the quote, when I saw this, do you know what it reminded me of?
What did it remind you of?
I feel that you're probably the generation that will have seen some of these, especially since you do that other podcast where you look at old shows. You've probably seen old G.I. Joe episodes.
Yes.
Where everyone jumps out of the tank or the vehicle that's being hit by a missile seconds before everything explodes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It is very much like, oh, let's have our cake and eat it too. Let's have an explosion, but also no one gets hurt somehow. And that is exactly what that feels like.
Yes, because that wrecking ball, full force, hits that thing, throws it through a wall, and he's fine. But I just loved that. I loved the delivery of this line from Oliphant because he had to have read that in the script and just laughed. When he comes up to the guy and he goes,
Are you sure? Because you just went through a wall.
Are you sure?
And it's that entire exchange is only there because the moment you see that truck get thrown through a wall by the wrecking ball, you go, that guy's dead.
Yes.
But because, again, PG-13, they need to stop, have an actual character with speaking lines, go up and go, you good?
So
he's good. We can go on.
It was dumb, but also funny.
Like, might as well just have the censor guy just walk on set and go, tick.
Exactly. He's fine. Don't worry. I did like, and maybe it was at one point in the script to be some sort of a Memphis Reigns catchphrase, because when we're introduced to him, he's explaining driving and speed, and then we get the reveal it's all kids on go-karts.
Mm-hmm.
And then he tells them...
Good intro.
I loved the intro. And it ends with... Let's ride! So we get Let's Ride, and then right before they go to do the heist, we get...
Okay, let's ride.
And I feel like that was supposed to be like his catchphrase.
I was hoping you'd have that, because that scene where the music, it feels like you were filming, they were doing their thing, and then Nick Cage went, all right, I have an idea. And then he said, we should explains that scene. Everyone on set just looks at each other and goes, I guess it is Nick Cage. We have to do it.
And I love it because...
And here we are.
Yeah, and I love it because you've got all the young crew are like, what the hell is going on here? What are these old people doing listening to this song? And even like Duvall is like, his character Otto likes the song, but also is sort of, can we get going here? But nope, Memphis has got to psych himself up and give a Let's Ride.
Which I feel is a bit of a missed opportunity, because like the whole point of that scene, if there is a point less than just like allowing Nick Cage to Nick Cage, is to set that barrier between the two generations.
Mhm.
Like, these old dudes have their ritual, that thing that they used to do. I feel that everyone from the old crew should have been 100% invested in.
Yeah.
And all the youngins just being shushed. And it is symbolic of this is the old people's heist, because a lot of the things that go wrong is because the young people fuck up.
Yeah,
So
basically.
So
I
get you that PG-13 rating.
yeah, we get one. You get one. So there, we've used it.
I'm done. Hopefully.
We do get, though, a great line. I also have used this many times when the kids do mess up and they come back, and Memphis says to him, it didn't copy over, but it was decision making. All your decision making privileges have been removed. I love that. I don't know what it is about that particular line. I think it's just his delivery, because Cage does get a couple of moments where he gets to do his Cage acting.
Yeah.
Like when he delivers Eleanor.
I just stole 50 cars for you in one night. All right, I'm a little tired, I'm a little wired, and I think I deserve a little appreciation.
Like,
I mean, it's cagey, but also kind of how most people would probably react.
I mean, yeah. No, it absolutely is. But it is that caginess coming through a little bit. It's PG-13.
Yeah, no, the delivery is cagey.
Yeah. This was another one I got. I had to get this because this is a good exchange between these two.
Look, I got everything under control.
Kitchen's on fire.
Whatever the hell that was he was making for breakfast was just sort of...
I think it was a salt-flavored omelet.
I think so. But I just love that your kitchen's on fire. Like, just so casually. No, I mean, it's a fun, silly movie that I enjoy a lot. And I understand why, like, there are people that I know that put this up as some of their favorite. I think actually Amy Frost, our friend, said this is her second favorite Nick Cage movie. And I completely,
Really?
I can understand why. I think there's some nostalgia factor to it. If you saw it when it came out, and it's sort of, again, because it's that 4 quadrants broad appeal, it's something that you can just always watch and never worry about. And you can watch it with basically anyone. And you're not going to have to, like, there's a lot of Nick Cage movies that I like a lot, but I'm not sitting down with my mom to watch Mandy, right? She's not, she's not going to enjoy that, but I could get her to watch this and not have a problem. So I think that plays into it.
Like I said, like it's a movie that, let me put it to you this way. Remember when Beetlejuice came out?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just saying that because Beetlejuice 2 is coming out, but you remember when Beetlejuice came out, it was like its own success, but then they decided to make a cartoon of it where they just played around with cartoony things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if they would have made Beetlejuice and taken everything from the cartoon and tried to stuff it into the movie and keep that live action, that's what you would have gotten as a feeling. Because there's a lot of cartoony things.
Oh, yeah.
With characters that could be developed in a Gone in 60-minute Saturday morning cartoon that kind of end up in the film.
Yeah.
Which, for better or worse, like I said, like the whole like Sphinx other dude like thing, fun. Not enough of it, not consequential. Like a lot of the characters' things are fun, but inconsequential, and that's what makes it, from a storytelling point of view, very frustrating.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely get that. I mean, this is like your sugary breakfast cereal type of movie. Like, it's not really...
It's your sugary breakfast cereal if once in a while one of the marshmallows was jalapeno flavored for some reason. Because that's the thing, like, you're enjoying it. Oh man, this is delicious. Like, once in a while, it's just something puts the brakes on your enjoyment, and it is unfortunate.
You know what it was? I was thinking earlier today, like, it's sort of the fast food McDonald's of movies, where it's like it's fine, and it's one of those consistent movies. But then I thought about it, and the way that you're describing it, it sounds more to me like my experiences with Wendy's, which is usually fine, but every once in a while you find that Wendy's that just ain't good. and you.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not just fine, but it's excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh,
And then you go again, and it's really bad. And that's the problem. Like when you get scenes that promise excellence, and then they deliver mediocrity or less, it's it's just so disappointing. And that's what you get a lot. Like we have a very good intro for the character, but then no foreshadowing for Eleanor. Like there's so many pieces that such easy fixes. I feel if the director would have had either a more solid script, and by solid I don't mean like better written, I mean more like tighter,
mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
more details, more like less describing the scene with vibes and more describing the scene with facts,
Mm-hmm.
and leaving less in the hands of the director to make up on the spot. We would have gotten something a little more rigid and more interesting. Like he could have focused on his visuals, which generally, apart maybe for some parts of this car chase at the end, are fine.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like that's the part that's kind of.
And I think
it's what's made me frustrated with it.
Yeah, and
especially since I went in like expecting a lot.
It's always tough. Like Nick Cage movies are always a tough one to gauge, right? Because you might think you're getting something completely bonkers. Like my experience with Season of the Witch, for instance, which was when he did about 10 years after this, where I expected or I thought I was going to get something very different from what I got. And at the end of the day, I didn't hate the movie. I had a good time with it, but it wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be. And I think that's where Gone in 60 Seconds kind of fits a little bit. And also, again, this is on the tails of a run where he did The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, Snake Eyes, and 8mm. Which, I mean, you take 8mm out of that for being kind of the outlier, but the rest, those other four are sort of action thrillers and they're very consistent. And then this one it's there, but it's not quite there. And there's parts of it that don't quite work, but then there's little bits that are like really intriguing and
really good, really promising.
And a cast that is full of people that I love in movies and are just there. Like, again, I like Will Patton a lot. This isn't his best role. I like Delroy Lindo a lot. This isn't his best role, although I think he's a lot of fun as the cop. I mean, he gets to do Delroy Lindo things. There's something about that guy. I don't know what it is, but same thing with like Vinnie Jones. Love Vinnie Jones. This is not, I'll take him in any number of movies over this, but he's super fun as Sphinx. So, overall, I do think it's a lot of it's interesting to watch a movie like this and sort of think about what it could have been, because there's the potential
makes me
there.
Sad if I think of what it could have been.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because again, like there's a lot of things that are very promising in there.
But I mean, now you can say you saw it. So when somebody brings up Gone in 60 Seconds, you're like, hey, I know what Eleanor is now. I've seen that movie.
I have wiped this dark spot from my slate.
Which, that's all we're trying to do here. And another
fixed mistake in the past.
Speaking of writing, though, you have a little project that is going on right now that people need to know about.
Oh yeah, speaking of storytelling, if anybody wants to really defend Gone 60 Seconds and pick apart what I do, for those who don't know, I'm a writer, not by profession, because that is almost impossible. But I do write on the side, and I am a published author. It sounds like such a brag. But I also write for a podcast called Aquilo. Am I getting this right? Which is a cozy horror podcast. It's all about demons and baking and witchcraft and demons and coffee. I messed up my quote. Anyways, but the thing is, we've been going around for 7 seasons so far. This is hosted. It's narrated by Amy Frost, which if you follow some of Travis's other works, you might have heard from and or seen.
Mm-hmm.
And she does a fantastic job. And we are trying to turn the first season of Aquilo into a book. We're doing so by going through my publisher Inkshares, through which I've already published 3 books. And one of them which has sold roughly 40,000 copies, which in book, I'm told is a good number. So we're trying to do that, and the way Inkshares functions is a crowdfunding type thing. Basically, they ask that the authors prove that their project has worth by assembling 750 pre-orders, which is nowhere near what you need to actually pay the cost of publishing a book, but it does alleviate some of the effort and shows that there's interest in the book. As of today, we have a little over 100 pre-orders done, and we've been live for 4 days. So very happy with that so far. But for anybody that's interested, you can either go listen to the podcast, see if it interests you by looking up Aquilo written as such on any podcatcher of your choice, Spotify, Apple. We even have it on YouTube. So wherever you're comfortable listening to podcasts. And if you prefer books, or if you feel that it is worth becoming a book, you can then go to aquilo.com/book, and it will take you, it will transfer you to the funding page, where we describe the project in more detail, some of the bonus that you can get for participating, and exactly what we're hoping this book is going to be. And you can pre-order your own copy, which will be signed by hopefully both Amy and I.
Excellent. And I will have links to all that stuff in the show notes. I will say this. I don't say this because you and Amy are some of my favorite people. I genuinely love Aquilo as a show, as a project. It's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. So when I heard you guys talk about wanting to do the print version of the book, I was all about that. And I'm glad that it's going well so far. And that link will be for aquilo.com/book will be in the show notes. And that goes until the end of August, correct?
Basically, the end of the campaign is on the 31st. We need 750 pre-orders to get it greenlit, if you will. Anything that we have over 750 is not wasted.
Okay.
It basically, the more we impress the publisher and the more basically seed budget we give them, the more they can do as far as promotion is concerned, as far as getting blurbs from famous authors, and also just making a prettier book as far as a physical book.
Okay.
Obviously, the more initial budget you have, the cooler things you can do with the printing.
Excellent.
And we have cool things. Like cooking is a big part of Aquilo, and we've been asked a lot, oh, you guys should make a cookbook. Well, we can't make a cookbook, but we can have a recipe section in the book, and we're going to do that. And we're lining up some pretty fun illustrators to do the images for that.
Excellent. So aquilo.com/book to back that, and aquilo.com or anywhere on your podcatchers to find the show. And it's definitely worth checking out. Absolutely. JF, thank you for being here. It's always fun to have you on. It's fun to talk with you. I was really curious on your takes on this movie from a storytelling aspect, and you brought that with you, which was cool. It was, I always like getting your takes on things. So thank you so much for being here this week. It's, I think it was a year ago, just about a year ago that you were last on. So it's good to have you back.
Yeah, well, last time was Renfield, and that was again for Cage-A-Palooza,
Yep.
which is, I mean, I love it. Like, I don't feel like I've seen enough Nick Cage movies, so I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, and there's still plenty of them. He keeps putting them out. I just saw Longlegs a couple of weeks ago. And
that looks like it's good.
Yeah, they're
I've heard great things about
I liked it a lot. But it's my kind of movie. It's one of those slow burn, atmospheric horror movies, and I'm all for those. So,
my favorite movie is a Denis Villeneuve movie. So, slow burn,
yeah,
for sure.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for being here. And next week, I've got Phil Keating coming back, and we're going to go to a little different Cage. Cage-A-Palooza is going to roll on, but this time, I'm going to watch, because I have not seen it yet, the movie that won Nick Cage an Oscar. I'm going to watch Leaving Las Vegas. So that's going to be happening next week with Phil Keating of the Botched podcast. I can't wait for that. And if you like this show and you want to see it live, I do record live Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/tvstravis, or you can also find it on YouTube at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@tvstravis. Then the show comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your shows, and also on YouTube in a video form. So you can find that there. And as always, check out tvstravis.com. That has links for my merchandise store, which I have revamped and adding things to, as well as the Patreon for this show, patreon.com/WYHS, or find the link at tvstravis.com. For as little as $1 an episode, you can back this show and help me keep it going and do things like going to Dragon Con, which I'm doing in a month, and doing the show live at Dragon Con. that is almost exclusively because of patrons that I was able to afford to do that this year. So,
have you been to Dragon Con before?
I have not.
Oh, gird your loins.
So I am preparing and getting ready. I've got about 24 days until I go. So
keep preparing. You won't be ready.
I'm sure I won't be. But yeah, that's what's coming up. So next week, leaving Las Vegas with Phil Keating. I can't wait. But JF, thank you so much for being here. We'll do this again. It'll be less than a year before you're back on. I'm just going to put that out now. So, but until next time, and all of that fun, just remember to enjoy your movies. And it's Cage-A-Palooza. We're going to get a little weird this month, all right? This has been Wait You Haven't Seen.
Shit, I can't swim. I know I can't. So you know what I do? I stay my black ass out the pool.
He was highly underutilized. Chi McBride is great.